Ready. Oh. Face. Reset. Colors.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Colors. Right. Face. Forward. March.
Thank you, Dr. Aguilar. Do you have any opening comments?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I want to say a huge thank you to the Lafayette Parish staff and students for contributing to the United Way of Acadiana Harvey relief efforts. Through a fundraising activity last Friday, LPSS raised $21,251.76 for victims in the greater Houston and East Texas areas. Recently, Dr. Michelle Hodge Broussard with the University of Louisiana at Lafayette was awarded a 5-year grant totaling $2,304,438. The significance of this grant is the impact it will have for LPSS English as Second Language staff with professional development opportunities and activities to improve instruction for students with limited English proficiency. LPSS will benefit with its partnership with ULL to better meet the needs of English language learners via additive, content-based instruction, in particular through two-way dual language immersion model, such as we have begun at Charles Burke Elementary School. Two-way immersion has been proven to be the most powerful method to increase academic achievement and English proficiency in English learners. It is an objective of this grant to develop Charles Burke as a model site for the expansion statewide of this innovative and effective learning model. Another beneficial focus of this grant will be to build bridges between our Spanish-speaking and English-speaking communities. We look forward to working closely with Dr. Hodge Broussard and her staff on her project, English Transformation Center to Sustainable and Scalable Success. Congratulations to our World Language Immersion Specialist, Tia LeBroom, and Principal of Plantation, Ann Herman. They have been selected by the College Board to participate in the Chinese Bridge Delegation in China, November 2nd through the 11th. The trip will provide an opportunity to develop a deeper understanding of Chinese customs and the culture, as well as an opportunity to hear fluent Mandarin Chinese language. Both Ms. LeBroom and Ms. Herman will learn more about education in China and build partnerships to expand the support of Mandarin Chinese through our Schools of Choice program. This past weekend, the weekend of September 8th, 9th, and 10th, the Ove Como speech and debate team took 10 students to the Grapevine Regional Invitational Tournament in Grapevine, Texas. This tournament had over 900 students with over 14 states in attendance. Now remember, we only took 10 of those Como High School students, making it to the final round of their event and placing in duo interpretation, placing 5th, Madison LeBlanc and Cecil Craig. Cecil Craig, that would be Mr. Craig's son. In humorous interp, placing 6th, Madison LeBlanc. In dramatic, placing 4th, Paige Albright. In prose, placing 4th, Paige Albright. Placing 3rd, Colby Camp. Tournament champion Emily Guidry. In poetry, placing 4th, Jacob Foster. Placing 3rd, Rashawn Leday. Tournament champion Emily Guidry. So remember, we only took 10 students to this competition with 900 students attending. Our 10 students brought home the 2nd place in team sweepstakes out of all 151 schools in attendance. So congratulations to the sponsor, Jacob Simon, and of course to Como High speech and debate team. Congratulations to Tracy Oquan, director of our Gear Up program. During the May 2017 event, Tracy participated in the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society fundraising efforts. Tracy was named Acadiana's 2017 Woman of the Year after her team raised over $72,000 for cancer research, the most money ever raised by a woman for this fundraiser event. Tracy has recently been selected as a recipient of the Lafayette Commission on the Needs of a Woman Excellence Award for Public Service. She will be recognized October 6th at the City Club Luncheon. Congratulations and thank you to Tracy for her contributions to our school system and, of course, this community. Nominations for the 2018 LEF Teacher Awards are now open. Since 1999, LEF has hosted its annual Teacher Awards honoring outstanding K-12 educators in Lafayette Parish, public, private, and parochial schools. This Academy Award-style event provides public recognition for those who give tirelessly but generously to the children of our community, our teachers. There are 4 categories in which finalists are chosen: elementary school, middle school, high school, and inspirational. A top finalist is chosen in each category. Educators are nominated by the students, parents, fellow educators, and members of the Lafayette community. Nominees must be active academic educators in Lafayette Parish. To nominate a teacher, go online to leffoundation.org. Mark your calendar for the LEF Teacher Awards on January 18th, 2018. And members of the board, as of today, our enrollment counting only those students for MFP purposes, so we're not counting pre-K students who are funded separately. Lafayette Parish shows an enrollment of 30,146 students. Compared to the official October 1 count of last year, which was 29,559 students, we are showing an increase today of 587 students in the district.
Dr. Aguilar, can you update us on the status of the displaced students from Houston?
We are still registering students. We have 38 displaced students that we're counting today. Our enrollment continues to tick upward, just a few each day. Obviously, we don't know how long those individuals will be in Lafayette, but we have certainly welcomed those students to our district. And I am pleased to announce that bus routes for gifted enrichment, one-day pull-out services will begin the week of Monday, September 18th. This is 1 week earlier than our original anticipated rollout date. Bus drivers are being given their routes and student rosters tomorrow, which is Thursday. They will be driving and verifying their routes and their route times. Enrichment teachers will provide their students with bus information Friday afternoon. And the last piece of this will be we're expecting high school gifted transportation services to roll out Monday, September 25th. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. And I see that we have several St. Thomas More students here. Are you here for a class to observe? Mr. Santani?
I had the pleasure of visiting with these young ladies before the meeting. They are from STM. They are right here.
And gentlemen as well.
Oh, Mr. Abe. Oh, I didn't see it. They weren't here when I. I thought you guys were in high school. Why are y'all on opposite sides of the room? Anyway, they're here for their civics class. They were tasked with observing local government in action, and I snidely suggested that perhaps their project was due tomorrow, and this was the only meeting available. But they said they are getting a jump on it, and it is not due until May. So welcome, boys and girls.
Mr. Angel.
Just a quick comment about the boys sitting on one side of the room. I want you young ladies and gentlemen to know that when I went to Cathedral High School, not only could we not sit next to the girls, we didn't go to school in the same building. We didn't even have the same address. The girls went to Mount Carmel and the boys went to Cathedral. So, you know, y'all are moving right along.
We've made progress, Mr. Angel. We've made progress. All right, the next item on the agenda is Human Resources personnel changes.
Madam President, the changes are attached, and Ms. Thibodeau does have a few administrative introductions tonight.
Ms. Thibodeau.
Good evening, Madam President and Board. The first introduction I'd like to make tonight is the Assistant Principal at Broadmoor Elementary School, Charmaine Jones. Ms. Jones received a bachelor and master's degree from the University of Louisiana Lafayette. Ms. Jones has taught at Austin Elementary, El Leo Judice Elementary, and Broadmoor Elementary School. Also, she has served as the discipline teacher at Alice Boucher Elementary, El Leo Judice Elementary, and Westside Elementary School. Her most recent position has been serving as the instructional strategist at S.J. Montgomery Elementary School. She has been selected as Teacher of the Year at 2 schools, and she has been an LEF Teacher of the Year nominee. Congratulations, Ms. Jones.
Good afternoon. A special thank you to the board for this opportunity. I am pleased, honored, and humbled to have been chosen for this position, and am eager to make quality contributions to the Lafayette Parish school system. Also, a special thank you to my family for your support. Thank you.
The next introduction is Stephanie Robyn, who will be the next principal at S.J. Montgomery Elementary School. Ms. Robyn earned a Bachelor of Science degree from LSU and a Master of Education degree and a +30 from UL Lafayette. She has served as a teacher for East Baton Rouge Parish, Acadia Parish, and Lafourche Parish before coming to Lafayette Parish as an ELA teacher at N.P. Moss Middle School. She began her career in Lafayette Parish by serving as the reading facilitator at Alice Boucher Elementary School and Live Oak Elementary School. She also served as the District Health and Wellness Coordinator. Her most recent position has been serving as the Assistant Principal at Live Oak Elementary School. Ms. Robyn is a nationally board-certified teacher. She has been awarded the Academic Excellence Award and Robinette Award at UL Lafayette. She was awarded the Acadia Parish Teacher of the Year, and she's been awarded the Lafayette Education Foundation Teacher of the Year for 3 years. Congratulations, Ms. Robyn.
Thank you, Ms. Thibodeau. Good evening. I'm Stephanie Robyn, the newly appointed principal of S.J. Montgomery Elementary. At this time, I would like to thank the Lafayette Parish School Board, Dr. Aguilard, the district leadership team, and the teachers of S.J. Montgomery for choosing me as the instructional leader of this incredible school. For the last few days, I've been working with Ms. Lafleur, the previous principal, to ensure a smooth transition. Although I am new to the site, I already feel the positive energy of the staff and the students as they embrace all facets of learning. Ms. Lafleur has built a phenomenal staff, and together they have worked diligently to improve the climate, the culture, and of course, that school's SPS. Ms. Lafleur is leaving behind some big shoes to fill, but I am confident that I'm up to the challenge. I would also like to express my gratitude to retired principal Stacy Danos. It is due to her leadership and mentoring that I gained the skills and knowledge necessary to lead a school. There were also many school leaders with whom I had contact while I served as the Health and Wellness Coordinator. I learned a lot about leadership from watching them interact with the faculty, the students, the parents, and the community stakeholders. Last of all, I cannot forget my family, Denny and Victoria, who due to prior commitments could not attend tonight, but who have encouraged me to continue my education, always seek to improve myself, and they are my biggest cheerleaders. I look forward to starting officially next Monday at Montgomery. Again, my sincere thanks to all of you who have helped me take this next step in my professional career. Thank you and good evening.
Next, I'd like to introduce the new principal at Myrtle Place Elementary School, Katherine Brizel. Ms. Brizel earned a Bachelor of Elementary Teaching from HECE in Gazali, Belgium. She earned a Master in Science of Education from the University of Mons in Mons, Belgium. Her teaching experience includes teaching elementary to middle school French students as a second language, French immersion, and English immersion. She has taught in Belgium, Canada, and the United States. She has served as the school director, assistant principal, and principal at the French and Montessori School at the Audubon Charter School in New Orleans. Congratulations, Ms. Brizel.
Good evening. Bonsoir. Bonsoir, Monsieur Angèle. I would like to first thank Dr. Aguilar, Miss Samek, Mr. Craig, as well as Miss Thibodeau, for allowing me to become the new leader at Myrtle Place. I would also thank the board members and Madame la Présidente du board for allowing me to be here this evening. So I'm very happy, very thrilled to be working at Myrtle Place. I know this is a school that has a lot of potential, and I'm very happy to follow what Madame El Koubi, the former principal, has started, because she set a vision, and that's exactly what I'm seeing for a Myrtle Place. So thank you very much.
Next, I'd like to introduce the new Social Studies Physical Education Health Specialist, Jeannine Lafleur. Ms. Lafleur has received a bachelor and master's degree from UL Lafayette. She began her career as the assistant women's softball coach at Sam Houston State University. She then moved back to Louisiana and taught at Acadiana High School, Berwick High School, and Paulboro Middle School, and became the assistant principal at S.J. Montgomery Elementary School. Her most recent position has been principal of S.J. Montgomery Elementary School. Ms. Lafleur has been awarded Teacher of the Year at Paulboro Middle School. She's been an LEF Teacher Nominee and LPSS Principal of the Year. Congratulations, Ms. Lafleur.
Thank you, Dr. Aguilar, Ms. Samek, and Mr. Craig, and members of the board. I have been honored to serve for the past 10 years as an administrator at S.J. Montgomery. I have worked closely with the students, the teachers, the parents, and the staff there. I am very humbled and honored to take the next step to begin working at the district level to help us attain our goal as a district. So I now will be able to work with the students in the entire district, not just at our school. So I am very humbled, and I assure you that I will do my very best to move our school in that direction and our district in that direction. I want to thank my S.J. Montgomery family. The past 10 years have been amazing. It is with a heavy heart that I do move on, and I also want to thank my husband, who reminds me regularly that I am not the principal at home. So we have now taken care of that. So thank you. I am very honored, and I appreciate it.
I'll now move on to the consent agenda. I will read each item, and board members will pull those that they would like to discuss. 3.1, proposed changes to policy file DCF fund balances. All right. Then, Mr. Knezek, do you want to pull that one?
Yeah, that's the, yes. I
The one we discussed earlier? Yep. 3.2, approval to amend the 16-17 pupil progression plan to reflect changes to the first grade report card. 3.3, fundraising matching program.
Pull that, please.
3.4, 17-18 district and administrative calendar revision. 3.5, approval of bids for Southside High carpentry equipment and supplies. 3.6, approval of bids for Southside High welding equipment and supplies. 3.7, approval of bids for Lafayette High Boys and Girls Gyms and Truman Early Childhood Gym air conditioning. 3.8, approval of bids for Karen Crow High Boys and Girls Gyms and Karen Crow Middle Gym air conditioning. 3.9, Construction Fund 2012 Limited Tax Bond Fund budget revision. 3.10, Capital Improvement Fund budget revision number 4. 3.11, Self-Funded Insurance Activity budget revision number 3. 3.12, 2016 Construction Fund budget revision number 4. 3.13, Southside High School Construction Fund budget revision number 3. 3.14, Sales Tax Collection Report for July 2017. 3.15, Sales Tax Fund Final Budget Revision for fiscal year 16-17. 3.16, Career Development Funds Commitment of Allocated MFP Funding. 3.17, SNAP Raise.
Can you pull that?
3.18, approval of amendments number 1 and number 2 to Cooperative Endeavor Agreement with BO Elementary Site.
Pull that, please.
3.19, Resolution 09-17-1915, adoption of millage rates for 2017. 3.20, General Fund Budget Revision Number 4, final for fiscal year 16-17. 3.21, Summary of Grant Funding and Activity. 3.22, Local Fuel Supplement for Contract Bus Drivers.
Pull that, please.
Who was Mr. Knesset?
Yes, ma'am.
3.23, Self-Funded Construction Budget Revision, Lafayette High School Replacement Facility Programming. 3.24, Self-Funded Construction Fund Budget Revision Number 4, fiscal year 16-17. 3.25, Special Revenue Fund Budget Revision Number 4. 3.26, School Food Service Program Fund Budget Revision Number 2. 3.27, 2002 half-cent sales tax fund budget revision Number 3. 3.28, General Fund Budget Revision, step increase for all full-time employees and pay for performance stipend for Compass evaluated employees only.
You pull that one, please.
3.29, permission to lease Section 16 land Dusel. 3.30, 2002 half-cent sales tax fund declaration of excess reserve payout to teachers.
Pull that, please.
3.30.
Madam President, could you please pull 3.29?
Yes, sir. 3.31, budget to actual reports, August 17. 3.32, substitute bus driver long-term pay.
Can you pull that, please?
3.33, revisions to policy DJE purchasing. 3.34, revisions to policy IDDF, education of students with exceptionalities. 3.35, savings recommendations of the group health plan for plan year 2018.
Pull that, please.
3.36, approval of minutes. All right.
Madam President, I move that we approve all items not pulled.
Second.
Mr. Angel, if you don't mind, I don't know if you want to ask anybody if they had another meeting to attend or not.
Well, the students are here to observe, so I don't know if they're ready to go yet. But any of the administrators?
Yeah.
Yep. I was going to do that momentarily. All right. So, Madam Secretary, the items that were pulled were 3.1, 3.3, 3.17, 3.18, 3.22, 3.28, 3.29, 3.30, 3.32, and 3.35. All right. All right. For any of those items that were not pulled, if any members of the audience have any comments on any of those, now is your time. All right. Any questions or comments from members of the board on those items that were not pulled? All right. Then, Madam Secretary, I'll call for the vote.
Nine for and none against.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the board if we can take a couple of these matters out of order, that being the 3.30, the half-cent sales tax excess reserve fund issue, and then the group health plan saving recommendations issue. Do you have any objection? All right. Then we will call 3.30. Oh, you want to do the health plan first? Okay. 3.35. Savings recommendations for the group health plan for plan year 2018. Ms. Bernard, is that yours?
Madam President, this is determined that this was a duplicate item that was already approved back in May as part of the budget process and is no longer needed.
Okay. So we've already discussed, okay. So we'll just let it fall off. Okay. So if there are no motions on it, then we will move on. Okay, 3.30, 2002 half-cent sales tax fund declaration of excess reserve payout to teachers for year 16-17.
Madam President,
I move that the school board declare an excess distribution for the 2002 from the 2002 sales tax fund and distribute it in one lump sum in the amount of $1,684.26.
All right, a motion by Mr. Hidalgo, second by Mr. Broussard. All right, anyone in the audience who has any comments on this particular item? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Hidalgo.
It's
just
not
1,684.
It's 1,647.07 cents.
Nope, that's just not what it says here in front of me with
It says
documentation.
1,684,261 is the total excess.
Oh yeah, I got math class. That's went to school in Milton, man.
All right, so you got the numbers correct?
You update the number, Miss Dorothy?
Which y'all count different down there?
Yes.
No, I just changed the comma.
Dorothy, if you have the motion typed, maybe you can put it up so we can check the numbers, make sure the motion is satisfactory before we discuss it.
Who's second?
Good. Do I need to repeat it or they got it?
Read the motion. She has the motion up, so if you can read it and make sure it's what you intended. Does it sound correct?
Where's the motion?
Oh, it didn't pop up on your screen in the middle?
Nope. No, that's not my motion.
I think, all right, so repeat your motion for Ms. Dorothy.
That the school board declare an excess distribution from the 2002 sales tax fund and distribute it in one lump sum in the amount of $1,647.07. Trying to get him more money.
Okay, so you got that, Ms. Dorothy?
Just a second.
Okay. All right. Mr. Cole?
Good evening, Madam President, board members. Jonathan Cole, President of LPAE. I also serve as a voting member of the 2002 Blue Ribbon Committee sales tax. The committee met last week to discuss the different options with Mr. Guidry and Dr. Aguilar and his staff. The board the committee voted for the recommendation that was before you. Voting in the affirmative, I stand in opposition to Mr. Hidalgo's motion. As a man who has an AC that was replaced in June, I understand the value of a sales distribution like that. However, this is something that we have on a regular basis. We have discussions about what to do with this tax, and it's something that's it's not new to the discussion. I will say that looking forward, a pragmatic view, and perhaps not the most popular view, is that we look at these as permanent salary increases. And so the Blue Ribbon Committee took that into consideration, and after a great amount of discussion, that was the recommendation made to you. So again, I would say take into consideration that we have a tax that's designed to increase our salaries as educational faculty in our district, and that we continue to honor that goal by building it into the salaries so that it is a permanent component, a permanent raise, so to speak, for those that qualify for the tax. Thanks.
Ms. Mangum?
I'm Linda Mangum, retired teacher. I, too, am a member of the Blue Ribbon Committee, and we did vote to put money into the salary. And I am speaking to remind you all that when we passed the tax, we told the parish and our voters that this was going to be to go into salary for faculty and keep our district within the top 6 within the state, one of the top 6 parishes in salary, so we could continue to attract and retain quality teachers. And for us not to put it into salary, we're not doing what we told the public we would do. And I think you should give that. Matter of fact, Jules Godin, who at that time was our chief financial officer,
It was his idea to give a distribution when we worked for a couple of years to get a reserve. So if we ever had an event, such as one of the floods, we would be able to pay our teachers. And everybody has worked diligently to keep that amount, and we have done that. And any excess was to go into salary. So I ask you all to please consider that. Let's do what we told the public we would do. This is why we have a hard time getting a tax passed. Thank you.
Okay, any other members of the public? All right. I'm going to comment first on this issue, and then I'm sure my fellow board members have comments as well. First, Mr. Cole and Ms. Mangum, of course, we thank you for your service on the Blue Ribbon Committee. I'm sure it's not an easy committee to serve on. My personal view is that, yeah, I think from a business perspective, the option that both of you have expressed interest in, or that the Blue Ribbon Committee voted for, makes better sense. However, I, and I'm sure my fellow board members did as well, received dozens and dozens and dozens of emails from teachers overwhelmingly asking for the lump sum check. And in this particular case, I'm going to have to go with what those teachers have expressed. And this is a question for my fellow board members. So when the Blue Ribbon Committee meets on options like this, is a survey sent out to the teachers and the employees entitled to this to ask their preference or not? Does anybody know? Mr. Hidalgo?
I don't have an answer to that because I'm not part of the administration, but in a minute when it's comes around to my turn, I'll tell you that I'll be happy to tell you the results of the survey that I sent out, which is why you probably got dozens and dozens of emails.
Okay. All right. So Mr. Lashley will come after me, but it's my intention to vote in favor of the motion as it currently reads. Thank you. Mr. Lashley?
I probably received between 150 and 200 emails, and probably 90% were teachers asking for the lump sum, which is the majority. But my question would be, maybe for the Blue Ribbon Committee, why is there a choice if this was meant strictly for salary? Why do we have a choice? Why doesn't it just go strictly into a raise every year? And we because I mean, myself personally, I'll take the raise, and you multiply that $1,000 over 30 years continuously. But you have to look at where we're sitting. When you get this many teachers saying they want the lump sum, it's their money. So my question is, why do we have, why is there an option for a lump sum or a raise? Yes, ma'am, you may. Oh.
And before you do, yes, ma'am, just 1 second. So, and I guess my other point I forgot to make was that whether it's a lump sum or it becomes a permanent part of the salary, either way, it is an increase in the teacher's salary for that year. So, right. So, all right, Ms. Mangum.
They do have extra money for the year. I understand a teacher wanting that extra money. Those of us who teach scramble every month. I get that. But the issue was to raise a salary to keep us at a certain level. And that's what we told the public that this tax was about. And it's the taxpayers' money that is paid to this school district. And what happened when we passed the tax, it was first given to the teachers starting in January of the year we passed it, after we passed it in 2002. Okay? The next year, because we were trying to build a reserve, we only had about $20 or something. And if I remember correctly, Mr. Godin, there were several of us. It was LPAE and Apple, and we all sat with him, and he said, let's just give a distribution check this year, and we'll work it out after that. And every year, and the reason why, once they put it in the salary, the actual salary, then you have to honor that every year. And the financial officer's concern was that the district may not be able to do that, and that's how the distribution check was born. It came for the financial officer of this district not from the tax that we presented to the people. I understand why the teachers want that in one lump sum. It's not really their decision. And let me tell you, I have supported teachers every day for 999 years that I've been teaching. And I am supporting them today because I think it is in their best interest to have that money put into their salary as they move forward through their careers. Thank you. Have a question about how?
Well, I was just going to tell you, you know, there is a difference between raising someone's salary and raising someone's income for a year. And that's what I've explained, you know, to a lot of the teachers. And I know you've been stuck on 999 years for a while. I sure hope you get to 1,000 soon.
And I'm still teaching, so.
Mr. Hidalgo.
All right. A couple of things. You know, I wasn't here that long ago, but I can tell you a couple of things. This is the teachers' money. The tax is being paid to be given to the teachers. That's what it's for. And if you want to look at it, technically they've received a distribution every year, so they've essentially gotten the raise, just not in the form of a raise. I've sent the poll out. I received 225 responses since Sunday. 199 of them, or 88%, said they want the lump sum, while 26 or 12% say they want the pay raise. The money's in the bank, and the money's for them. It is their decision. We're tying this money up. You know, one thing we never discuss, well, I discuss it, but one thing this board never takes up for the serious discussion is to get away from the nonsense that this tax is supposed to somehow magically increase teachers' pay raise every year above the local average and focus on what the administrative rule says it's supposed to do. Yes, pay raises were included, but if you read the administrative rule, it specifically has a schedule of pay raises, which were technically for the first 2 years. The only place in that administrative rule that it talks about an excess distribution is the very last line item, way after reducing pupil-teacher ratios. They hired 121 teachers with this tax revenue out of the gate. About 40 are left. The rest have been replaced and put in the general fund. It's an artificial increase on this excess every year because we're taking money that's supposed to be used to hire teachers to lower class sizes. We're sending it over to the general fund. Of course this amount is going to grow. And so what's going to happen is if we put this money in their pay raise, and there ever comes a time where there's not enough, we're going to have to pull it out of the general fund. Then it's going to be talked about how we're squandering taxpayer dollars because we can't afford, or we're going to be cutting more positions. And so now we're cutting positions to make sure that these folks get a pay raise. The fact is they've always gotten the check. That's luck has it that way. Not just luck. Past school boards have made good decisions. There's a healthy reserve in the event that tax collections in any given year, and I would say several years, you know, that they're below expectation. The conversation about what this tax is supposed to do needs to be had, and that's the missing link. Because if this were about teacher pay raises, permanent raises, well, I wouldn't be talking about this every year. And I get ridiculed for sending these surveys out because, you know, we get, you know, dozens and dozens of emails. However, 88%. That's where I'm going. It's their money, the money's in the bank, and they want the lump sum. That's how they should get it. It should be that simple.
Thank you. Mr. Knezik?
Well, a couple of things. One, I agree with Ms. Mangum. The long-term financial, if you look at the long-term benefit to the employee, having the pay in their paycheck and their salary is more beneficial to the employee. So your logic is sound there. One thing I think that we need to do as a board in the future is first decide how we're going to spend this money according to the administrative plan, and then if we elect, as Mr. Hidalgo was saying, if we elect to spend this money on distributions or increased pay instead of reducing class size, then we discuss on how we're going to distribute the money. But I think the first conversation, and I think we're doing this backwards, the first conversation we need to have is why aren't we spending this money on reducing class sizes? And I bring that up, and I do believe it's still within, because I'm speaking in opposition of the motion as it stands, that, and I don't know, Dr. Aguilar, did you provide this information on class sizes to everyone? Okay, so all the board members in front of you, you should have a spreadsheet that shows the student pupil ratio when we were before we were elected, when we were elected, and every year up till now. And as you know, we have increased the student pupil ratio since we've been elected. Circumstances are what they are. We had a decrease in sales tax revenues, and we had to make tough decisions. Well, I think we're in a position today that we can change the course of the student pupil ratio over the rest of our term. If you count tonight's vote in the next 2 years, we have the opportunity to use some of this 2002 sales tax to reduce class sizes. I suggest, or I would argue, that none of us really want to leave the school system in worse condition than when we received it. I don't think any of us want to leave the school system with a higher student to teacher ratio than when we were elected. And the only way that we can change that is to make decisions, like decisions tonight, to fund new teaching positions with all means possible, and one of those means is the sales tax. So what I asked the staff to do is to just calculate, according to their calculations, we would need to hire 42 additional teachers to reduce the student pupil ratio to when we were elected. I'm not suggesting that we do that overnight, but as an exercise, if we hired 16 teachers this year, 16 teachers the next year, and 10 the next year, and funded them out of this tax, we would return the student pupil ratio back down to when we were elected. That would reduce this disbursement. That would reduce this disbursement by about a half this year. And as you can see in the future years, according to probably Mr. Guidry's calculations, the disbursement, so we could hire 16 teachers this year, the disbursement would only be $817. It would be $416 the next year and $166 the next year. And I think this does not include, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, any increases in sales tax. Is that correct, Mr. Guidry? So we're here to make tough decisions. This is one of those tough decisions. Do we want to reduce student teacher ratios and use one of the tools in our toolboxes is to fund those teachers through this tax, or do we want to keep the student teacher ratios where they are, increased from when we were elected, and then pay this money out as basically an end of year bonus to the teachers?
All right, any other comments? Mr. Santani?
I'll give my annual. I welcome Mr. Kinesic. For the last 2 years, I've voted against this because I'm firmly in favor of the raise and not the bonus. I welcome you, and I encourage you to enjoy reading your emails that you're going to get after this meeting from the teachers who feel like you don't care about them. But the fact of the matter is we do care for the teachers, and just like Miss Mangum, I firmly believe it's in their long-term best interest. It's not in their short-term interest, for sure. It's in their long-term interest to take a permanent raise, because it is, in fact, a permanent raise. This is not $1,600 that may not, but will probably be there next year, right? It will probably be there next year. It may not be there next year. It may not be there the year after that. It may not be there the year after that. I'd be willing to bet that some point in the next 20 years for you teachers just starting out, this bonus will not be there. And let me tell you what happens when you missed 1 year of a $1,200 bonus when you could have had that $1,200 raise in there every time. That 1 year, given the compound interest effect of lifetime earnings, ends up being a great deal of money just by missing 1 year. Secondarily, the ballot language, to Miss Mangum's point. You know, we very recently went to the public with a tax, and we had a very vigorous debate over whether the money was in fact dedicated. We, me personally, very many of us swore up and down that it was dedicated, that we had a project list, that we couldn't use the money on anything else. I'm going to read you the language from the ballot. Teacher salaries and related benefits and percentage increases in same. To me, personally, we're all elected officials. We all make up our own minds given the information in front of us. Me personally, I feel it very clearly we must use this for teacher salaries. Now, we can have an argument about whether a bonus is technically a salary or not, and I understand that. But once again this year, I'm going to hey, you guys said 90% want the raise. I'll be the one out of 9. that doesn't. So 90% want the bonus, 1 out of 9. So anyway, thank you for humoring me yet again.
Madam President, can I just wait quick? I want to applaud you for having the courage to bring this up because, again, this is what I'm talking about. I don't think it's being spent the way the tax intended, and I appreciate Mr. Centeni's viewpoint of the ballot language. However, it's the same scenario where if, you know, in our tax, if you stopped where it said for any legal purpose, then of course you'd get one opinion. But if you continue reading the rest of the document, you would see that the administrative rule outlines what the category is or how they are defined. And so salaries of classroom teachers was absolutely part of that, no question. But it specifically outlined a 2-step pay raise, which was in 2002 and 2003. It then continues to talk about salaries of classroom teachers involved in providing extra instruction where needed, specifically to address pupil-teacher ratios. That is my argument. I am in favor of Mr. Knezik's point here, but since that has never been put on the table, and I have been on the losing side of that argument, I default to what the teachers want, since it's their money.
Mr. Knezik.
Well, I would like to offer a substitute motion prior to funding, whether it's a lump sum or a salary increase of a disbursement from this fund, that instead of 16 additional teachers be funded, that we at least fund 8 teachers out of this fund prior to making any sort of disbursement. So my motion would be to fund 8 teachers out of the 2002 sales tax. And Mr. Guidry can correct me on the, if it would be fiscal year 18, or if it would be, would it have to be FY 18?
We could make that effective for current fiscal year.
We could make it 17?
17, 18.
17, 18, okay. So that would be my motion.
All right, before I ask for a second, I have a question for legal counsel. If you can review the agenda item and see if this kind of motion is going beyond the corners of the agenda as far as our public notice of what we're going to be discussing and voting on.
I believe that the language is broad enough. The substitute motion that's been offered talks about the calculation of the excess, and so I think it would be broad enough to encompass that.
And to clarify, what I'm asking is, before we calculate an excess that we're going to disperse and how we're going to disperse it, I'd like to at least agree to fund 8 teachers out of this tax.
Madam President, do I take the motion that once the 8 is calculated, then the remaining balance would be distributed in
Correct.
accordance?
I would ask Mr. Guidry to do a calculation quickly and
if you subtract $536,000 from the number on the agenda, I believe that would be 8 teachers.
Dr. Aguilar.
Members of the board, Calum advises me that if we were trying to start at the bottom, return the pupil-teacher ratio at the earlier grade levels, to move K3 back to the pupil-teacher ratio prior to your getting on the board, it would take 11 teachers to do so. The alternative would be to fund 5 additional salaries. And Calum, what would that be? That would be 4th and 5th grade. Moving 4th and 5th grade would cost us 5 additional teachers, or moving K3 to the pupil-teacher ratio would be 11 teachers.
Well, I'd offer to modify my substitute motion to be 11 teachers to at least accommodate bringing our K through 3 grade levels to the level that we were at prior to being elected. And then we can develop a plan between now and the rest of our term to address the rest, including future years, which those 11 teachers would cost us how much?
11 times... How much?
About 737,000.
to a cost of $737,000 to the 2002 sales tax.
All right. So do you still second the motion as reworded?
I do.
Do you want to wait for the calculation?
Please.
All right. So, Madam Secretary, do you have the substitute motion?
I'm getting the amount.
Okay, thank you.
What was that amount? Dollar amount?
They're still calculating.
In current year.
737,000.
So, board
Right, so
members, as I see it, if this motion were to pass, there would be a calculated amount that would be left over that we could then vote to disperse, whether it be lump sum or salary increase.
All right, so the substitute motion is to hire 11 additional teachers to lower the student ratio for a certain grade. All right, and then distribute whatever is excess beyond that. All right, Ms. Pat? They're going to put up the calculation momentarily.
Yep. Thank you, Madam President. This comes up every year, and we talk about it. When that sales tax was passed in 2002, that plan that everybody's referring to was not part of the tax. It was not presented to the public as part of the tax. And so what Mr. Centini is saying and what he's reading, the tax goes strictly for salaries and to increase salaries. And, you know, it got muddled, and a lot of people, and you've got to realize that a lot of the teachers in our system today were not here in 2002. A lot of them that were there have retired, and they're not coming back to the meetings. But, you know, we need to stay true to what the law said when they passed it. We need to follow it, and we need to keep it. And if they wanted that academic plan in there, that's two words they could have added, and they didn't. So obviously it was not part of the original tax that they passed. And I'm for, you know, giving it to the teachers as part of their salary and maybe distributing what's extra, just like you said. Thank you very much for supporting that. And I thank Mr. Knissick for trying to bring it into line, but it still needs to go to the teachers. The administrators got nothing of that, and we supported it because we knew the teachers needed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sonia. Any additional public comments on the substitute motion? Yes, Mr. Hidalgo?
Just right quick, I'd like to, again, and as usual, correct the record. The administrative rule was brought to the public in a public meeting of the school board on October 24th, 2001, which happened to be before the tax election that we're discussing. It was a public meeting brought to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. If there are no further public comments, then any comments from the board on the substitute motion? Dr. Shassel?
I'm just waiting on the numbers.
It's on the motion. Is it on your screen?
No, ma'am.
11 teachers would be 737,000 out of the 2002 sales tax for 17-18.
Can you say that number again for me?
737,000.
And fellow board members, if we do not make this decision tonight to put these 11 teachers on this tax, then we will still have 42 teachers in addition when we've, I mean, at least today, than when we came into office. So even if we do approve these 11, we'll still have 31 that we'll have to address over the next 2 years. And I do believe all of us want to at least return the system as good as we found it.
While we're waiting on the numbers, could I get Mr. Knissick to clarify? I understand his motion is to add the 11 teachers, but then you are, in fact, saying the rest be paid out in one lump sum in October, correct? The remaining
I'm not
excess.
specifying that. I think that's for further debate. After this motion were to pass, I believe we go back to discussing. I think we would have further discussion on how to disperse whatever excess there is. I mean, correct me if I'm
Mr.
wrong.
Broussard?
That was the question. What would we do with the remaining money that's in question? Would we give it in one lump sum or put it as a salary increase. But
I'd
it's
like to
not
leave the
included in
issue
your- it's
separate
not
right now. I'd
it's
like
not
to.
included in your motion.
That's not included in my motion. My motion is to address these teachers, and then I think that we could have a subsequent motion after that
Madam,
on how to spend it. Can we do that?
Madam President.
Yes, sir.
You asked the question if the substitute motion was encompassed by the wording of the agenda. I was under the impression that we were simply going to distribute the excess, and that would clearly fall within. If, however, we're separating it as two issues and voting on an issue of do we hire new teachers and then come back up and discuss the distribution of the excess, that would be offensive, in my opinion, of the
public notice requirement.
Well, then
Yes,
I will modify my motion to include the stuff I mentioned previously about the 11 teachers, and then to recommend that the remaining balance be paid out in lump sum.
All right, so Ms. Dorothy, add to the motion, the substitute motion at the end, and distribute the excess in a lump sum.
Ms. Morris, just for the board's knowledge, the calculated excess distribution would be $958.63.
Okay, Dr. Shassel.
Forgive me, my mind must be working some different numbers then. Billy, how many employees is that? Are we taking the excess distribution and that $1.6 million number for us to get to 1647? Are we dividing that by a certain number of employees to get to that number? What's the number of employees we're dividing this excess distribution by?
2,221.
Okay, so the $737,000 that's being taken out, possibly, that would be taken from the excess distribution, right?
Yes.
Right. So that would leave us at like $950,000.
How are you arriving? I'm not seeing how the nine.
If we're taking $737,000 out of the excess distribution, that would leave us up at about $950,000 about. I mean, it's going to take me a second. It might be like 947,000.
So this allocation that we're talking about is for the fiscal year 17 excess declaration. Is how I understand it. Is that correct, Mr. Knazik?
Unless you need to advise me to correct my motion, yeah.
So in essence, the distribution.
Matt.
I was looking at it for the next fiscal year, so that if you hold off a minute, that 958 is going to change.
That number would have to be at least half, just based upon simple numbers. 958. That's way too much money. It'd have to be. Numbers don't lie.
What's the number of employees who are entitled to 2002 tax?
It would end up being like
What number are you using?
$450.
2000. But Dr. Shastel, the difference is
don't lie.
The dollar amount that you're looking at allocating. You're talking about you're looking at the 1,647 and using that to back into it.
Okay.
Is that
well? My question is, we're at $1.6 million for the distribution.
4.6. 4.6.
I'm looking at it right here. If we're declaring an excess distribution of $1.68 million, right? That's what the agenda item says. 1,684,000.
I'm looking at the agenda item, and that's if we fund a $1,000 salary increase.
Okay.
And the rest go to, so
the 647 would be the excess distribution.
right, so that's not the case. What we're looking at is, let's look at a whole new option. So we're starting with the 4.6 million again.
Okay.
We're starting over again. And we're saying from that 4,684,000, let's deduct the 737,000.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go ahead and do that right now. And keeping in mind, once we do that, then that 11 is teachers are the only positions that we're going to fund. Right now, the scenario that the board has a copy of has a phase-in for year 1, 2, and 3. If we distribute it, the excess in the 14th check, this 11 teachers will be funded, but then that's it. We're not going to add another 11 teachers the second year. If that is in fact the intent of your motion.
But these teachers, will they permanently be funded out of this tax? These 11 teachers, right? Okay, so,
yes.
And then I can tell you right now, there's no way I'm going to get the board to approve 16 or 41 tonight. So that's why I started with 8 and got to 11.
But I'm mentioning that only to make sure I understand what your intention is, and I think we're there.
How many eligible employees?
2,221.
All right, so Mr. Knezik, your reasoning is completely sound and I support it. My concern is that even though it complies with the public notice requirement according to our legal counsel, I'm concerned that the teachers did take a look at this. They've told all of us what their preference is, the ones who responded, and they have not had an option or an opportunity, and this is a direct benefit to them. So it's not necessarily, I'm going to have to vote against your substitute motion tonight simply because I would like to make sure that the teachers, those that are going to be most directly affected by this, and have a chance to review the change and the recommendation. So I'm either going to have to vote against yours and for the original motion, or we can defer this for another month to provide an opportunity for notice to be sent out to the teachers. That's my opinion. Okay. Ms. Morrison?
Yes, I just wanted to say I agree with Ms. Morris. I'd like the teachers to have more time to review this and get their input about what we're doing. I think it's just a drastic change tonight and for myself, so I'd just like a little bit more time. Thank you.
Mr. Lashley. Sorry. Mr. Guidry.
But I just wanted to mention from a timing perspective, in order to process, if there's going to be a 14th check, in order to process it in time for October, we would really need to make a decision rather quickly. The October meeting is the 11th. Would that be okay? Okay, Mr. Vita has indicated that would still allow time to process the 14th check, so we could come back if that is the wishes of the board. And I just wanted to mention that it would be 737,000 would go towards the 11 teachers, and the 14th check would be 958.63. So those numbers would apply for Mr. Knezik's motion.
All right. Any further questions or comments from the board? Mr. Angel.
I want to say that in principle and in theory, I agree with Mr. Knezik that we should try to reduce our pupil-teacher ratio. And you've heard me say this before, and I'm going to keep harping on it. If you take the 2,000 teachers that Billy just mentioned, I'm using round figures, and you take the 30,000 students that Dr. Aguilar mentioned earlier, I'm using round numbers, you know what that amounts to? 13 students per teacher. That's false. We don't have nowhere near 13 students per teacher. It's probably twice that per teacher. So, Mr. Kinesic, I would agree with you if we define more pointed what a teacher is. And a teacher is a student. A teacher is a person that has a class every 50 minutes or every hour, whatever it is, with 20 or 25 or 30, whatever it is. That's a teacher. We got people that are teachers, and they might teach 2 students or 3 students. The real benefit should be the teachers. A teacher who can't leave anytime he or she wants to, who's got a class full in front of them every hour or every 50 minutes, whatever it is. Point 1 and 2. The third point I want to make is the other thing. The human element of this is whether it's those of you who would prefer a raise, or those of you who prefer a lump sum, and the majority would prefer the lump sum. I too have received a whole lot of emails like everybody else, and I think that our employees, the majority of which are counting on this money. They are counting on this money this year, this month, or whatever the case may be. And I know you've heard some of the reasons: Christmas, health issues, whatever they are. But it's tough for me to vote. It's tough for me. I'm not going to vote for your motion, and the reason is what I'm saying. We need to define teachers, and these teachers are expecting it. If we would define the teachers and you want to make it effective next year, I'd vote for it.
Madam President, just right quick. I think it's important to note that this also includes librarians, assessment teachers, speech therapists, and counselors, and that's as per the administrative rule.
Right. Mr. Broussard.
Whether this motion fails or pass, I think and every year we go through the same 2002 tax, how we're going to distribute the monies. I think it's time for us to get a clear picture of what we're going to do with it. Either we're going to hire the 11 teachers that your motion tonight, or the 42 teachers that we need to balance the student-teacher ratio, or give a permanent raise. Whatever the Blue Ribbon Committee comes up with, they should have all the facts before them and all the other things needed to make a decision. We came here tonight either to give them $1,000 in raises and $600 some in bonus. Now we at $900 in bonus and no raises, and a whole different picture. So we're voting on something that wasn't even on the agenda to discuss tonight, and it makes it difficult for either one of the motions to pass or succeed.
Mr. Knesset.
And this is just kind of the final comments on this. Dr. Aguilar, I believe in the future, I find this to be the equivalent of my employees spending profit on a job before me as a business owner decide where I should spend that profit as a business owner. And I think in the future it would be better if you put the cart before the horse, or the horse before the cart, however that goes. And you allow the board to at least decide how we want to spend this money according to the administrative plan, and then secondarily have a conversation about how that money is distributed. But I would ask that we just vote on this, and again, I'll remind you that I'm asking to fund 11 teachers out of this tax, and then the remaining would still get a bonus of $958, which is still significant. It's not the $1,600, but it's still a significant amount of money. Thank you.
All right. If there are no further comments on the substitute motion, I'll call for the vote. Dr. Chasson, on the substitute motion. Okay.
When it comes to the substitute motion, I just wanted to quickly voice that at the age of 21, when I went and voted for this, I had no idea the administrative plan existed because it wasn't on the ballot. So with that being said, I voted for teacher raises, teacher salaries. Granted, yeah, they passed it a month or so before the actual vote came out, but it wasn't publicized. Nor was I in the meeting that particular day. I wasn't on the school board yet. I was still at LSU. So when I voted on it, that's what I voted on. I didn't vote on the chance that they would move it somewhere else. And then as well, if and when we can possibly come back to the original argument, I'd like to voice ahead of time, I'm not going to try and convince anyone about it. However, I would still like to at least voice that I understand the short-term lump sum makes sense, and I've always voted for the lump sum. But at the same time, if 2% of your inevitable retirement times 20 years will give you 40% of your average salary for a person 20 to 24 years, and then anything above 25 years will give you 2.5%, then at that point, it makes much more sense, and it's hard to get, not say folks to realize, because I'm going to give an example, but I'm not trying to belittle anyone. If I tell my son, you know, I'll give you some money now, I can give you some money later, or I can give you a whole lot of money now, he's gonna take his $5 and he wants to go to Dollar General and buy his Cheeto Puffs. It is what it is. But if we could somehow possibly have the discussion with everyone in the long term when it comes to putting this money as a permanent raise, everyone has to understand that a 20-year employee that will retire, yes, the bonus money will calculate into your retirement if it's your final 3 years. But if any one of those 3 years we don't have that bonus money to give, and yet we had put it in your permanent salary, that's an extra $400 in retirement in the perpetuity, guys. So that's $400, $800, $1,200, $1,600, $2,000 that you'll get extra in your first 5 years of retirement that you won't see if we keep giving this bonus money and we don't build it into the salary. Now, does that benefit the board and central office? It doesn't financially, because if the bonus money isn't there, we still have to fund that. So it's easy for us to vote for it because the teachers really want it. I'm not pulling the wool over anybody's eyes, but it actually benefits us. Whereas if you happen to be a 25-year employee and we're multiplying that times 2.5%, then you're getting $625 every year extra into retirement. You want to multiply that 10 years, that's $6,250 that you'll see extra if you let us put it in your salary as opposed to just giving it to you as a bonus. So just something to think about. Won't convince anyone on the board. Not going to allow anyone. Just something that the teachers need to start coming to grips with. Bonus money, lump sum, it looks nice really right now, but I can get you a whole lot more money if you let me put it in your salary in the long run.
All right, that's the last comment on this issue. I'll call for the vote on the substitute motion.
Seems like plenty of. Thought he was first on the agenda. The trooper.
Seven, 4. I'm sorry, 2, 4.
All right, Madam Secretary, can you put the original motion back up, please? The substitute motion failed, so we're back to the original motion. Yeah. We've commented on that as well. If there are any additional comments on the original motion. Okay. And once it's up, you had to retype it for Mr. Hidalgo. Remember, it was much shorter than that. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. The original motion is that the school board declare an excess distribution in one lump sum of $1,647.07. All right. Dr. Shassel.
I'd like to quickly state that I'm going to join Mr. Centani in his in his minority situation, and I know folks are still going to send emails saying maybe you don't support teachers, but no matter what, you're still going to get the same amount of money. But in the long run, I can get you more money by voting the way that I do. And by December, you will have gotten $1,000 pretty much if you let us do it this way. But I do understand that this is probably going to fail. I just like to announce ahead of time that I've always voted for the lump sum. It's just somebody that understands a little bit more about money, maybe a better way I can manage my finances, explain it to me in layman's terms the way I can better understand.
Thank you, Mr. Knezik.
I'd like to offer a substitute motion to take the $1,000 annual increase to the teacher salary schedule.
Second.
All right, we have another substitute motion. All right, any comments from the public on this second substitute motion? All right, from the board? All right, then I'll call for the vote.
Motion they're showing now.
Once they vote on it, when they vote, it'll pop up. Substitute.
I want to do it. Better for me. It is so much better for the long term.
14th check in October. Yeah.
We're going to take a break after this vote is completed for anybody who has other meetings to attend. So, oh, I know. After this issue is complete, right? But then I'm going to take a short break. So you have the new substitute motion, Madam Secretary?
Madam President, it looks like we're down about half of the students. We're wearing them out.
What happened to all our students?
It looks like most of the girls are leaving.
All the guys are still there.
Congratulations, young men,
Good job,
for persevering through this.
Good job, guys.
Who y'all beating 45-0 this week? All right, Plaquemine it is. All right.
Madam President, just while it's being populated, I just wanted to remind all of the board members that because we've had so much back and forth, this motion, that motion, this motion, that motion, that this motion here is in fact goes against what the majority of the teachers want. Just wanted to remind everybody that.
And Mr. Knezik, can you read the words of the motion? Is that complete? Do you want to distribute the excess in a lump sum?
Yes, the motion reads that the board take the $1,000 annual increase to the teacher salary schedule with the 2002 sales tax funding. I believe that the intent is the same, yes?
I think we have to vote to distribute the excess. And distribute.
And distribute the excess. Let's add that to the motion.
Did anyone survey the voters? She keeps saying it's the teachers' money, but I believe it's the voters' money. And as I read the ballot language to you earlier, very clearly says salaries.
That's right, and
So
salaries include bonuses. That's my opinion.
Well, that's a fine opinion.
I think that's the court's opinions in many cases.
That's
as
fine.
well.
That's a fine opinion, but I'm pretty confident that salaries definitely include salaries.
And as you know, in business, it was the taxpayers' money when they sent it to the school system. Now it became the teachers' money, and so this is pretty clear.
Maybe if they weren't getting what they paid for, they might not want to give us that money anymore.
All right, the motion is up, and I'll call for the vote, Madam Secretary, on the second substitute motion.
Three for, 6 against.
All right, then, Madam Secretary, I call for the vote on the original motion.
Is that necessary?
Madam Chairman.
Mr. Angel.
Madam Chairman, I would suggest, no matter how this comes out, I would suggest that we review this. Not this particular. This issue is going to end with this vote, but before next year that we review this, and let's talk in depth about it months before it's time to do it. I think we can all agree on that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Are you waiting on anyone to vote, Madam Secretary?
6 for, 3 against.
All right. So we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to go through the rest of the agenda.
Right, so I'll retype what the executive committee wanted. Yep. So I'm going to hand that out. That what?
All right, if my fellow board members will please take a seat. All right, so I'd like to ask my fellow board members, we still have several items. I think that a couple of them are going to have quite a bit of discussion, and some of them will not have as much. I'd like to take the shorter items first and get those out of the way so individuals can go home. Do you have any objection to that? All right, so I'm going to call 3.17 next, which is the SNAP raise, Dr. Chasson. 3.17, SNAP raise. You don't want to make a motion on it? Okay. Okay. All right. So, sir, I see that you have a SNAP T-shirt on. So no motion's going to be made on this item, so there won't be any discussion on it. All right. So did you have comments that you wanted to make?
Oh, so I'm the representative
okay.
for Greater Acadiana, working with every parish outside of Lafayette. I've got 25, 30 coaches want to work with me in Lafayette Parish. So that's simply why I was here. Just the board members need.
If we had questions for you. Like okay. All right. So this item's going to die for lack of a motion for tonight. So thank you. All right. 3.18 approval of amendments 1 and 2 to Cooperative Endeavor Agreement, BO Elementary Site. Mr. Santani.
Madam President, I move that the board approve Amendments 1 and Amendments 2 to the already approved Cooperative Endeavor Agreement for the purchase of property for the new BO Elementary Site.
Second.
All right. Any questions or comments from members of the public on this item? From the board?
Mr. Dugan, would you please brief the board on the discovery of the servitude as well as the resolution and what we are doing to remediate the issue?
I think Mr. Dugas, he said briefly brief.
In as few words as possible.
Very briefly brief.
We're fixing it.
Maybe.
Maybe Kyle can come up. I have contacted the architects are working with the city of Broussard and LCG to relocate. It's actually a very small ditch, but for some reason when we went to do due diligence, there's a 60-foot servitude on each side of that ditch, including the width of the ditch. So once we found that out, we requested an extension of our due diligence period. We had a 150-day due diligence period, but it took a long time because we were cooperating with the BOs on the retail subdivision development they're doing in correlation with the school. So from what I understand, they're working with LCG directly in the city of Broussard to get this fixed as soon as possible.
Is this in the city of Broussard or unincorporated?
Yes. It's in the city of Broussard, but when the ditch was dedicated, it was under LCG. It was not in the city of Broussard upon the dedication.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there are no further comments, I'll call for the vote.
Nine for and none against.
Okay, the next item is 3.22, local fuel supplement for contract bus drivers. Mr. Knezik.
I move that we approve the local fuel supplement for contract bus drivers.
Second.
All right, so the motion should actually be that the board give authority to the superintendent to increase the local fuel supplement when it does not result in an increase to the total transportation budget. We're giving him the authority.
Right.
Okay. All right, do you still second, Mr. Lesherly? Or who seconded, Ms. Morrison? All right, any discussion from members of the public on this item? All right, members of the board? All right, Madam Secretary, I'll call for the vote. 3.22.
Eight, 4, 1 abstain.
All right, the next item pulled was 3.28, general fund budget revision, step increase for all full-time employees and pay for performance stipend for Compass evaluated employees only. Mr. Santani?
Madam President, I move that the board approve the general fund budget revision in the amount of $2 million.
Any comments from members of the public? Who seconded, Mr. Hidalgo? Okay. All right, any questions or comments from the board? Madam Secretary, I'll call for the vote. Oh, sorry, Dr. Shessel.
Which groups of employees would this encompass?
This is all employees.
All employees.
Dr. Chesson, I'm told all full-time employees.
All right, if no further questions or comments, I'll call for the vote.
Nine, 4, none against.
All right, the next item pulled is 3.29, permission to lease Section 16 property. Mr. Angel.
Yes, ma'am. I vote that we approve the permission to lease Section 16 property. I'm happy to find out that Mr. LeBlanc's going to be able to keep his business and the house, and the cane farmer's going to give us more than we were getting before. So
all right, we have a second. Okay, a second by Ms. Morrison. All right, questions or comments from the public? Any additional comments from the board? Madam Secretary, I'll call for the vote.
Mr. Knezik?
Yeah, I thought it did.
I'm going to take
9, 4, none against.
All right, the next item pulled is 3.32, substitute bus driver long-term pay. Mr. Knezik?
I move that we approve the substitute driver pay revisions 32.
I'll second.
Board approve the revision to the substitute bus driver long-term pay.
Okay. We have a second by Ms. Morrison. Okay. Comments from members of the public? Okay. Comments from the board? We skipped. We're going to go back. All right. If there's no discussion, I'll call for the vote.
It's right, Mr. Centeni. This is right. Let's put it on next month on a Monday. Then they'll know what happened. Want it back on his agenda.
9-4, none against.
All right, we have two matters remaining. I anticipate discussion on both of those. The first one is 3.1, proposed changes to policy file DCF fund balances. Mr. Knezik.
I'm coming. So, Mr. Guidry, I want to make a motion, but I want to make sure that the one on the agenda is actually the one that's in front of me with the 2.5 months. It's not. Okay. So, board members, there was I'd like to move that the board approve the revised policy file DCF, and the one that I want approved is the one that's in my hand, which I'm going to make sure that all of you have, or I'll read to you the changes. So I'll need a second in order to discuss it more.
Well, I'm not sure the full motion's been made yet. Give him time.
So does the subs?
Okay.
I have a copy. Okay.
Hang on, let him read the motion, and then you can make a second, Mr. Hidalgo.
Thank you.
They're not looking at specific changes that
Okay. Okay. So, board members, the motion is that the board approves changes to policy file DCF fund balances to change the economic stabilization fund as follows: replace 3 months with 2.5 months, and to replace operating expenditures and transfers for the year with operating expenditures. That the board approves the board executive committee's recommendation for changes to policy DCF fund balances. It's a long motion, but I can explain to you, well, as soon as I get a second.
Would you read it again, please, your motion?
Yes, I will read it one more time. That the board approves changes to policy file DCF fund balances to change the economic stabilization fund as follows: replace 3 months with 2.5 months, and to replace operating expenditures and transfers for the year with operating expenditures. That the board approve the board executive committee's recommendation for changes to policy file DCF fund balances.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay. Mr. Guidry has a question.
All right, so just for those that are here, basically what this motion is doing is authorizing a reduction of the reserve fund from 3 months to 2.5 months, and also removing certain transfers from the calculation that Mr. Guidry can explain. So, Mr. Guidry?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that the second part of the motion, that the board approves the board executive committee's recommendation, at first section actually is the recommendation. Depending on whether or not the revised policy that the executive committee actually made it to the agenda, the second one would have applied, but since it was handed out during the meeting, the first one would apply, but it would work just as well leaving it the way it is.
Right, well, technically, the executive committee did not take any formal action. We didn't vote on it. We just deferred it for further discussion to this meeting. So that second sentence, Dorothy, should not be included in the motion. All right, let me ask for public comment first, Mr. Centani. So any public comment on this item? This is to reduce the reserve fund from 3 months to 2.5. Mr. Calder.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. My name is Burton Calder. I'm the auditor for the Lafayette Parish School System. My recommendation, I've talked to Mr. Guidry about this, and my feelings are I'd like to see y'all leave it at 3 months. Gives you more of a cushion, because you never know what may happen. I know the basically there's no set statute or law on this, but the good accounting theory, or most accounting theory, will at least tell you that you should have at least 60 days or 2 months. I do agree that I think you should probably remove the clause about the transfers, and those transfers should be eliminated. Only use the total expenditures of the school system and eliminate, I think it's about 12 million, if I recall, Mr. Guidry, for last year, or for this year's budget. 12 million, so that 12 billion, 25% of that would be about 3 million, or a little bit more than $3 million that you would be removing out of the current computation. But I would like to see, if possible, to leave it at the 90 days that you do have now.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Knezik?
Well, board members, we had the opportunity to discuss this at the 3:30 meeting, and the bit about the transfers, I think, is a pretty easy one to talk about. When they're calculating the operating expenses, Mr. Guidry explained to us that transfers were also included in that, and he recommended that we remove that, so that's why that's there. Regarding the 2.5 months, and I'm going to try to speak in round numbers, and Mr. Guidry, feel free to stop me if I make a mistake, but we need about $22 million per month. So we carry about, right now, $66 million. Again, these are just round numbers. The worst, so GAAP, the generally accepted accounting principles, recommends that we at least retain 2 months, $44 million. The worst sales tax dip that we've seen in the last decade is about $12 million, right? So if you look for the rainy day that's happened in the last 10 years, and we had a major economic downturn, I believe in 07, 08-ish, probably 2008, then 9 and 10, was that or is it 10 and 11 was the other one?
9, 10, and then 15, 16.
Okay, 9 and 10, 15, and 16. And the worst that we saw in sales tax dip was $12 million. So if you go with our 2.5 months, right, 2.5 months is $55 million. And let's just say we have another extreme event where we see a huge dip in sales tax, which brings us down another $11 million. It still keeps us above the recommended GAAP 2-month reserve. So that's where I came up with the concept of 2.5 after Ms. Morris had mentioned that maybe we don't need 3.
All right, and part of the discussion had to do with this, the data that Mr. Guidry, I guess, is going to give us about the additional surplus that's being added to the general fund. Are you going to talk about that?
I'm sorry, the additional...
The surplus that's attached?
Yes, we can do that.
All right. And so once Mr. Guidry talks about that, the discussion at the executive committee meeting was that during the sales tax election, we talked a lot about the state of our schools and the number of schools that had temporary buildings and the great extent of our facility needs. The public very clearly told us we need to live within our means and we need to figure out a way to take care of our facilities with what we have. So what we have is we have 3 months in reserves, and we can use part of that in addition to the surplus that Mr. Guidry will explain to us in a second, so that we would end up with, I think, around $22 million that could be used toward some of those projects on our facility list. And I think that it's important for the school board to begin acting very aggressively, because we cannot continue to put Band-Aids on our facility problems. It's why we're in the state we're in now. Mr. Guidry, if it's a good time for you to go through the surplus discussion.
Everyone can see the attachment, or do you want it up on the... Okay, what this schedule reflects is our projected surplus for the fiscal year 17, this school year that just ended. It's about 12.4 million. About 8.4 million of that's due to revenues. Revenues being over budget. We were anticipating that. We were expecting that because our typically our approach has been to budget flat or very conservatively, which in essence we had done during fiscal year 17. So we had property taxes and sales taxes that contributed to the lion's share of this of the 8.4 million of revenues, actual revenues over budget, and we had about $1 million in MFP, and then a bunch of other smaller amounts. With the remaining $4 million was typically salaries and benefits, being less than budget, actual expenditures being less than budget, and we were able to attribute that to the fact that when we have retirements, we prepare the budget that we present in February and March in preparing for the April and May presentation. When we have retirements in May and June and prior to the start of school year, typically those employees, be they teachers, school administrators, central office administrators, are replaced with individuals that have fewer years of experience, which then correlates to a lesser salary. A lesser salary means lesser benefits. So that's what the remaining $4 million can be attributed to. So what we're proposing is that of the $12.4 million, we transfer in fiscal year 17, prior to closing out that year, we're very close to doing so, $750,000 to the OPEB trust. This is a trust that we set up to basically make our group self-funded group health plan a little bit more fiscally sound. There's an increased focus. We anticipate that will increase, and where we will have other school districts, other governmental entities that will follow suit. We're one of about 3 or 4 school districts right now that are actually making contributions. This contribution is much less than the actuarially computed amount, but we feel that it is an effort by the board to show that we are doing what we can to fund at least a portion of what should be placed into that trust. The next transfer is $838,000, a transfer to self-funded construction. Typically, we try to transfer roughly the same amount from self-funded construction and capital improvement funds. Now, these are 2 capital funds. Self-funded construction is typically capital projects that have to do with renovations to our physical plants. Capital improvement funds have to do more with equipment. Includes buildings. If there's any purchase or removal of portable buildings, it'll include that. It'll include HVAC equipment, any maintenance vehicles, things of that nature. More on the equipment side. You notice here, however, that the recommended transfer to capital improvements is not $838,000 as it is for self-funded. It's $2,738,000. The reason for that is we're providing for 18-19 expenditures that we're anticipating, that we're expecting. $1 million for science adoption textbooks and $900,000 for implementing robotics programs in our middle and elementary schools to complement those that are already in existence at our high schools. With these transfers having been made, if approved, that leaves us with $8,200,000 that would be transferred to a line item in the self-funded construction fund that we call or named Committed School Site Renovations and Construction. We used to use the word reserve. That term has been replaced by committed. And the school site renovations and construction is a reference to the projects that were included in the tax initiative, the most recent tax initiative. So in essence, this is an effort by the board, or would be an effort by the board, to start putting money aside, in this case a significant money amount, towards beginning to fund those projects that were listed in the tax initiative. So if these transfers are made in self-funded construction, we currently have $2.6 million budgeted for 18-19. You might be thinking, well, we're in 17-18. Why are you talking about 18-19? We always try to put money ahead 1 year to ensure that we have funds available for that school year. So we have $2.6 million there. When finalizing the fiscal year 17 numbers, one of the provisions the board approved a few years ago is any excess sales tax collections, as defined by our actual collections being more than budgeted, 75% of that should be sent to the capital funds. The idea is, let's do what we can to increase what's available for capital projects. So this amount, the $1,836,677, represents 1/2 of that 75% excess. The other 1/2 is in the capital improvements fund in this area here. And then we see the 838 proposed transfer, 838,000, which is up here, and that brings us to having about $5.3 million set aside for 18-19 projects and for that school site renovations and construction fund. If you add that to the 250, that's already there, 8.2 million. Let's see, I skipped down. So 5.3 million available in self-funded. We'd have 8.3 million available for the school site renovations and construction. Those projects that were identified in the most recent tax initiative. In capital improvements, we'd have 7.3 million. Keeping in mind that about 1.9 million of that would relate to science adoption textbooks and robotics at middle and elementary schools. These two amounts here are really positive in terms of when you consider they're about, if you look at the range that these similar balances would have been in the previous years, anywhere from 5 to 8 million. 3 to 8 million. This is right in the middle, and which is a very good thing, very positive thing when you consider what our sales tax collections have been doing over the last 2 years. To have this money available is really positive and attests to the board's commitment to transferring funds and making them available to tend to the our capital project needs. Amount of these funds are nowhere near what our needs are, but we have to get started. With the results of the last tax initiative, it's basically sent a message that we're going to need to begin internally to start addressing these, and we have to take that initial step. So, with regards to the motion to reduce the 3 months to 2.5 months, we talked about that being $11 million. Just to give you an idea, that $11 million would be added to this $8.2 million here if that motion is in fact successful. So we'd be right at $19 million, almost $20 million that we'd have set aside to address those types of projects. Now, one of the questions, I'll just mention this in concluding the review of this schedule. some of the questions I've been getting is how much of this can be bonded out, and really, I guess the best answer to that would be it depends on how much of this money you think is recurring. Well, will occur from year to year. So we're looking at 8.2 million plus a potential 11 million. So let's use the 19 million. We would have to decide how much of that 19 million we feel is going to be recurring over the next 20 to 25 years, over the life of the maturity of the bonds to make those payments. So in saying that, if none of it would be considered recurring, then that makes all of it pay as you go. If we feel like, if the board is interested or is committed to, well, this is one time, but in future years' budgets, we're committed to carving out $2 million to add to this, and so that to give us some bonding capacity. That's something that we can do and calculate. You take the $2 million and basically multiply by 12, and that tells you how much you can borrow. That would be $24 million that we could borrow, going forward. Plus, the unused amount of one time would be available as well. So, the easiest answer would be, if we're not sure what recurring is, the full amount would be available as pay as you go. If we're interested in bonding it out, then we'd almost have to commit to carving out a certain amount of recurring revenue in the general fund that, for the most part, are minimal at this point. If you take a look at what we budgeted in 18 versus our actual collections in 17. However, it's not to say that the board couldn't decide to basically say, well, it may be minimal, but we'd like to see X number of dollars transferred for debt service purposes on an annual basis, so you're going to have to find the offsets. That's the only way we can truly get to a situation where we're bonding. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion. Any questions?
Secretary. Mr. Lashley?
I'd like to mention I'm not in favor of going from 3 months to 2.5. I'm kind of in the same thinking as Mr. Calder. If I could get the motion back up on the board, I'd like to make a substitute motion that leaves it the same, except staying at 3 months and removing the transfers and so forth and so on. And I think we would still realize, if I'm not mistaken, $3 million to go along with the 8, which would give us 11. I've heard the stories of why we have this excess from past board members of years ago when this system almost went broke, and I'm not prepared to saddle future boards with any harm. So I'd like to make a substitute motion. Do you need me to read it, Ms. Dorothy, or can you just replace the 2.5 months with leaving it at 3 months, and to replace operating expenditures and transfers for the year with operating expenditures?
I want to second Mr. Latchley's motion. And I want to thank Billy for his brief remarks.
Mr. Centani?
The only thing better than brief remarks is long remarks about numbers.
Yeah.
I would be remiss, Mr. Latchley, if I didn't mention that I too was initially concerned when I started thinking about this topic about going from 3 to 2.5 or possibly even 2 months. But what I realized, and I think to give a little bit of color to Mr. Kinezik's comments earlier about the decreases we experienced in 8 and 9 and 15 and 16, this particular board, in fact, experienced a very large decrease in sales tax collections of the order of about 10%. We experienced about a 10% decrease, and we never went under 3 months. We preferred and stood very firm on the side of making cuts in expenditures and saying, you know, we're not going to touch this money. And to me, that makes it almost, if we had 2 months in the bank, what would have been the difference? We didn't want to go into the reserve. We didn't want to, even though it was a pretty rainy day, we didn't dip into it. And so I feel like if the school system made it through the early 80s in the oil crash, we made it through the influx of students with Katrina, we made it through the dip in sales taxes in 2009, 2010, we made it through the dip in sales taxes in 15, 16. And I understand that the reserve wasn't always there, but I think 2 months is probably okay. That's it. I think we ought to really discuss this. This is a weighty decision for board members to make in one night. It took me quite a bit of time to arrive at my conclusions, and I don't want any of you guys, you would be fully justified in voting no to the 2.5 month change just because you're uncomfortable with it, just because you don't know enough about it. And I think we would be best served, because remember, we're not in any hurry. This money's sitting in the bank. The schools are not going to be built next week. We can wait a month, and there will be no appreciable difference. But there is an appreciable difference if we make a bad choice. And while I am in favor of reducing the number of months we keep in reserve, I think each board member needs to take their time and get themselves comfortable, because even if you still oppose it, you know you'll oppose it having done your due diligence and things like that. So that said, I do have a question for you. We're going to change the calculation to remove the transfers as an operational expense. Right now it's operational expense plus transfers. Now it'll just be operational expense. How much total transfers for, obviously, for the fiscal year 17 is going to be $19 million, right? Didn't you say 7 million plus 12? What is the transfers going to be? What are the transfers going to be for fiscal year 18? Is it 7 million?
Prior to any surplus, yes.
7 million. How much of that 7 million is debt service?
Well, it's 7 million of debt. Actually, I went back and checked it real quick. It's actually 8 million.
Okay.
That relates to debt service. Anything over and above that is not tied to debt service.
Okay, so here's my hesitance. I would be really hesitant to remove debt service from the calculation, because if we do experience a reduction, we can't reduce our debt service. Like, that is a fixed expense that we have. You know, we can, as unpleasant as it is, we can lay people off, we can close schools, we can do a lot of things. We got to pay that money. And so if we are going to change the calculation, I'd say operational expense plus debt service would be a reasonable way. Any other transfer, we do have the latitude to modify it up or down given the conditions. So I don't want to get too far down the substitute motion path. Well, is there a way? Well, so should I offer another substitute motion, or can I offer to amend his motion?
What do you think? I was going to say maybe he can withdraw his substitute motion, and then you can.
He might not agree with me.
Rephrase it. Well, so what are you thinking, Mr. Santani?
I'll be happy to leave it at 3 months.
Then I will allow you to amend my motion.
Okay, I offer an amendment to replace operating expenditures and transfers for the year with operating expenditures and debt service.
Okay, you need a second. Second by Mr. Broussard.
That's sufficient for what I'm shooting for.
Transfers out for debt service.
Okay, so operating expenditures and transfers out for debt service.
All right, so while the Madam Secretary's typing that motion, I'm going to vote against it, not because I disagree with what you're saying about the transfers, because I think that we do need to have more discussion about the 2.5 or 3 months. And so I'm not going to vote for the 3 months right now, because I think we're doing a disservice to our district to not use what we have to take care of our facility issues, especially when very shortly we're going to be talking about handing money over to schools for fundraising. Either we use the money we have to take care of our problems, or we don't. But I think that as good stewards of the Lafayette Parish school system and its students, we need to take some action.
I believe the to modify the policy would be a majority vote, but if it is in fact 5-4, then we may have to vote again to transfer the $12 million to the individual budget, because it does require a 2/3 vote to budget fund balance.
For a policy to be adopted, it must receive a simple majority of the members present and voting. It appears to be silent as to the vote to change the policy, but will require a 2/3 to suspend the policy.
Seven for, 2 against.
All right, the last matter on the agenda is 3.3, fundraising matching program.
Madam President, I move that we approve the fundraising matching policy as written.
I'll second it.
All right, any comments from the public on this policy? All right. I'm going to take board comments now. I'm going to start off because I have a long list of reasons why I oppose this policy. Right, we previously moved, or the majority of the board did, moved $500,000 to fund this potential policy, which is now before us. So we're looking at a pot of $500,000 for how many schools, Dr. Aguilard? 45? What's the total number of our schools? 45? All right. So, of course, if you divide 500,000 by 45, that doesn't come out to 35,000. It's more like 11,000. However, this policy, the way it's written, allows some schools the opportunity to raise up to $35,000 and get that much in matching. So part of my problem with this policy as it's written is it's extremely vague. I think it's going to be almost impossible to administer, but it certainly favors in its implementation those schools that draw from a much more affluent demographic or have very affluent or active boosters or supporters. That's a very small majority of the total schools in our parish. Most of the schools in our parish do not even have PTAs. They will not be able to raise money, and they will never ever be able to get any of this matching. So this is, in my mind, in the nature of specialized legislation that on its surface, on its face, looks neutral, but in its implementation is intended to benefit a select few. There's this $500,000. A majority of the board just voted to keep our reserves at $3 million. That $500,000 can pay to hire 8 additional teachers to help reduce our student-teacher ratio, a matter that we discussed earlier. It can be used to fix the drainage at the Lafayette High School gymnasium, something we've been putting Band-Aids on for years that hasn't worked. It can be used to add covered walkways. All right. It can be used for any number of things that actually go towards our facility issues and not towards some special project for our more affluent schools. I think that the policy as it's written is going to result in just an unfair treatment of our affluent schools and not benefit our schools that are taking care of our poorest students or in the poorest neighborhoods or have poor or low socioeconomic status. I think it's very disingenuous to say that, well, they just need to go raise money. They just need to go find sponsors, teach them to fish, don't give them fish. Those arguments don't hold water. That's a very limited view. And I know that there are some principals out there who've already raised the money and they're waiting for their matching check already. But I am adamantly and 100% against this policy. I don't think it's written well, and I don't think the implementation can be fair in any regards. Mr. Lashley.
I'm in support of this and allowing schools to go out and raise the money, and I will assist mine in every way possible. And I'm glad you mentioned covered walkways, because I actually have 1 or 2 schools that want to participate in this to get covered walkways to the so-called, what used to be called temporary buildings, that are now called portable buildings, so that the children don't have to get wet. So this is not $35,000, you know, to be sent to one school to, you know, to take a state championship football team and make it better. That's not what the money will be used for to Acadiana. They actually want covered walkways. So I'm glad you brought that up as an example, and that is something that will benefit the majority of the students there. And I actually have other schools that are looking for projects, that are construction projects, are looking to raise money. So I'm going to vote yes for this and wish every school their best.
I wanted to think about maybe instead of matching, maybe a percentage of the money raised, and also including in the policy what you can use the money for. So right now they could use it for anything. It could be construction, improvements. I'd just like to see a more detailed description of what the money will be used for, and maybe we could think about maybe matching a percentage rather than 100%.
I think the way it's designed is it has to be raised to benefit the majority of the students. It has to be a benefit to the school. So, you know, using the money to rebuild a football field doesn't benefit the whole school, and that's not what this money will be used for.
Mr.
So what do we
Santani?
think about a percentage rather than 100%? We could start off with 50%, 40%, and then maybe move forward from there. What do y'all think about that?
Well, I think we can probably take it on a case-by-case basis, because this will still require, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Aguilar, this will still require every single one of these projects to come to a vote of the school board, because it will require a budget revision, creating a new line item in the self-funded, or the capital improvements or self-funded construction fund budget. So the school board will have to approve each and every one of these projects, and if they do not meet our criteria for facilities improvements that benefit a broad range of students, then we can certainly send it back to them and say, you need to come up with something a little different. My heart of hearts, I don't think we're going to spend $500,000 this year. I swear to you, I really don't. If we did, though, it would be a phenomenal problem to have. A phenomenal problem to have. Because here's the thing. What do we think is the most important aspect of a child's education? I think just about everyone agrees it's parental involvement. It's the thing we bemoan every time, is that, well, charter schools can put parental involvement requirements on their kids and kick them out if they don't comply. And I think it was mentioned earlier that some of the private schools have more parental involvement. Maybe it's because they're paying tuition and they feel more buy-in and more ownership of their child's education in their child's school. But here's the thing, we can't do that. We take every child off the street, no matter what condition, where they are in life, what family life they come from, everything. But here's the thing we can do. We can encourage parents to get involved. We can encourage parents to donate money. We can encourage parents to attend fundraisers. Maybe it's just going washing cars on a Saturday afternoon. Maybe it's selling popcorn at the Lafayette High football game. Maybe it's selling Ram burgers at Acadiana High. This is a way a school can go to a parent and say, you put forth some effort. This is a benefit that this school is going to receive by partnering with the school board. We're going to get $2 for every dollar we get. I'm firmly in favor of 100% matching. Dr. Aguilar, how many Title I schools do we have?
So, all but 2.
What's the definition of a Title I school?
40%. I think it's 40% free or reduced lunch. Low socioeconomic status.
So it seems to me that most of our schools have a low socioeconomic status, or at least maybe not a majority. A lot of them do have a majority. Lafayette High is a Title I school this year. I know Title I doesn't pop into your mind when you think about Lafayette High. You know, the thing about teach a man to fish and all this other stuff, you know, I attack it from a different way. If we expect nothing from people, we will get nothing. And I think it's an exceptionally defeatist position to take, to say these students can't raise money. These students don't have the opportunity to raise money. Ms. Samet, can you review for us what the Pugh Family Foundation is doing for Alice Boucher this year?
Yes, sir. They're working in partnership with Alice Boucher. They're supplying about 10 or 12, I forget, tutors to work in the school with the students on their reading interventions and also mathematical skills.
All that required was Miss Irma Trosclair meeting with Nick Pugh. That's all it required. It didn't require a wealthy family attending the school. It didn't require a fundraiser where parents donated $50 apiece. It required one person speaking to one person. There are many, many organizations out there that live, just their sole purpose for being is to give money to educate poor children. There are. All we have to do is find them. That's it. And my great hope is that this program right here can be the first step on encouraging our principals and our parents and our teachers to get connected with their community and have the community get connected with their school system so that we can improve some of the facilities on our campuses. Thank you.
Mr. Santani, I also want to make one correction. It is the Pugh Foundation and the Schumacher Group together. Yes, sir.
Ms. Samick, are either of those organizations offering to donate cash to these schools so that they can get matching funds through this program? Are they providing services?
I have not had that conversation. I'm not aware. I can tell you that the Schumacher Group stepped up to the plate and paid for 4 schools to go through their entire staff, professional development training, and I'm not saying it was cash, but he stepped up to the plate.
They're providing services.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Hidalgo.
Yeah, Madam President, thank you for your comments. I understand what you're saying, and I really sympathize with what you're saying from one aspect. But, Mr. Centani mentioned Title I schools, and Dr. Aguilar said there's only 2 that are not Title I. And, I'm not going to ask which ones they are because I already know. And the point is that I think that we have split it up for too long. We've given too little. We've given too many, too little for too long. If we just split this up across the district, it really doesn't mean as much as if people work for it. I consider myself to be a hard worker, and I'm going to do what I can. I've already done that at several of the schools that I represent. And I think that one of the reasons that, charter schools and private schools have an edge sometimes over us is that parents are involved, people step up to the plate, and they make things happen. And I know that and I agree with you that there are a lot out there that can't physically hand that check, and I'm in that case many times. But guess what? I get up and volunteer to help the check make it there. So this can happen. This is the way it should happen. If it's not going to happen this way, then just scratch it all, distribute the money evenly. Nobody gets anything, right? We're gonna fix a couple of potholes, and we're done at 45 sites. I'm sorry, this is the way reality is, but yeah, it's time for us to ask people to step up and work hard for the things that they want. And Mr. Centani, I'm a little concerned about what you made mention of. Look, we don't want them just spending the money on anything blindly. However, if a school goes out and busts their tail and earns a lot of raises a lot of money for a project, we should do everything we can to honor their wishes for that money if this policy passes as is.
So I like the idea of encouraging more involvement and certainly incentivizing schools and staff and students to get involved. My concern, in my district, I don't have a problem. My district, all 4 schools, they'll be able to raise money. No problem. Probably in a day. But the problem that I have with it, and I think I've had since we came up with the concept, is how do we, there's 9 of us here, we're pretty smart people. Can we come up with a way or to make it somewhat equitable? Because to compare a school in my district, and to be honest, to compare a school in Timmy's district, they have different levels of parental involvement. They have different levels of the ability to raise money. It's just a fact. And to ignore the fact, I think that's the problem I have with it. It's not about incentivizing. It's about just the real realities of being able to raise that kind of money and get matched. If we can figure out how to make it somewhat equitable, maybe not annually, but over a period of time, so that a school in my district is not constantly coming up with a $35,000 every year versus a school in someone else's district not coming up with that money. That's the part that I have a problem with. And I'm hoping that we can have some discussions here tonight and figure that out.
Thank you. Madam President, first of all, I want to thank you very much for coming from a relatively wealthy district to speak in the manner of which you spoke. I appreciate that. I really do. And the same goes for you, Mr. Kinesic. I appreciate your concern for those of us in this district who don't have the wherewithal to raise the money. And I point out that if anybody knows that the $500,000 doesn't amount to every school getting $30,000, it's the maker of the motion. He's a banker. He knows it's not enough money to go around. But he knows where at least most of the money will go. He knows. And to my colleague across, Mr. Hidalgo, he said, let's just forget about it. We'll distribute it evenly and nobody gets nothing. That's not true. Distributing it evenly is the way to do it. Even distribution is the democratic way. And I think any public monies that are distributed should be distributed evenly.
It's definitely the democratic way. I'm concerned about the fact that we've been distributing it evenly. There's still, we went to Alamo for the recognition meeting the other night, and they're rightfully so hollering and screaming. They don't even have walkways, and many schools don't. These are real necessities. And if we keep distributing it evenly, we're doing nothing but a little bit of patchwork. It's just my opinion. A little bit of patchwork here and there. That has not worked for us. That is not working for us. This is an incentive to double what we've distributed evenly, essentially, and get more done. And there's a cap on it. I mean, there's a cap on it. And like Mr. Santani said, we're going to spend that the first year? No, I don't believe so. I agree with him. Look, my opinion.
It's not going to be evenly distributed.
Okay, I'm going to make a comment first. So part of my problem with the discussion about distributing or incentivizing parent involvement is that it shows a complete lack of understanding of social determinants and generational poverty. We're not talking about kids generationally coming from the same background. And yeah, many of our schools are Title I, but that does not mean that Woodville, that's a Title I school, is equivalent to Alice Boucher with regards to socioeconomic status. Because when you talk about socioeconomic status, you're talking about the entire community around that school and other social determinants that those kids at Woodville, most of them are not part of or coming out of as the kids at Boucher or Austin or Evangeline Elementary. So there is no way to sit here and say that everybody can go out and raise money if they just have some motivation. You have to have a complete understanding of what those social determinants are, and that's why it is so difficult to address generational poverty by simply saying they all do this, they all learn equally, and they all take the same standardized test. It doesn't work from an educational standpoint, and that's why schools in certain parts of our parish have low grades under the standardized system compared to others. And when you look at those in Lafayette Parish, one of the determining factors is the race of the students going to those schools. And so this policy, as it's written, cannot be used or distributed in an equitable way. And that's what we're talking here is equitability. There are so many other issues that have to be considered rather than what's just on this paper. And if this passes tonight, I will never vote for any project, even if they're coming from my schools, because I am adamantly and feel very strongly that this is not the thing that we need to do with this money. Who's next? Mr. Lashley.
I'm just wondering why then it says 3.3 administration, fundraising matching program. It's a fundraising matching program. It's not an equal handout to all 45 schools. It's a fundraising matching program. Yes, maybe Acadiana can raise $35,000. I doubt Ridge can. I doubt Burke can. El Leo may not be able to. Okay, not every school will raise the $35,000. But it's a fundraising matching program, not a handout. I will not vote for a handout. Okay? I will vote to allow schools that continuously work hard to raise money to improve the facilities that we're not improving. We're not improving them. If not, I would like an agenda item put on the next meeting to get covered walkways for Acadiana if we're not going to match the funds, because that's what they want to use the money for. They want to improve facilities that we can't improve on our own, and they're willing to raise the money to get matching funds to do it. It's not to waste on a luxury. Students not getting wet between the gym and the portable buildings is not a luxury. So it's being used for a good thing. But it's a fundraising matching program, not a handout.
Mr. Santani?
Very, very minor clarification that because I do appreciate how you're passionate about this, Madam President. This is in fact the capitalist way of distributing money. The democratic way would be for us to vote to build a covered walkway at Acadiana, and technically speaking, evenly distributing it would be the communist way of handling, or socialism. Just point of clarification.
Right. Dr. Chasson.
I feel like everybody's arguing. Feel like I went back in a time warp a little bit. I have a question for everyone.
We have to vote. Mr. Lashley is leaving.
Now, what way is that? What way is that? Okay. Quick question. I think this would be for administration, maybe, possibly.
They're not here?
I got a question. That's okay.
Staff.
That's okay.
We're talking about rain.
For staff. First, somebody's got to help me out first, because I know we're going back and forth here. Where's the policy on it? I don't see an actual policy.
And it really is not a policy. It's more of an administrative
right. So there's no
process.
There's no policy first. So before we even vote on this, we're going to have to come up with an actual policy, because this is, I see a description of it. I see how it could possibly be allocated, but even in the first paragraph, it states in the first year of this program, each school will be allocated $35,000 in matching funds, but we've only got $500,000. So we've got to fix this completely first, and then we can take a look at it, draft up an actual policy of how. Where's Mr. I want to have this conversation with Mr. Latchley being in here as well, so everybody can understand where I'm coming from, so we can assure every board member that it's equitable, and that Northside High, who raises $35,000, isn't able to get a second allocation of $35,000 2 years from now, 3 years from now, before STEM can. Because then at that point, I understand what Ms. Morris is saying, that that's not fair to every entity that can easily raise money. Were you able to hear what I said, Mr. Latchley? Were you able to hear what I stated? Yeah, just say yeah. I would like it to be very equitable, guys. So for me to support it, I would like to see something in place that states clearly before Northside can get their second helping of it, that Acadiana can at least get their first. So I would like to see that drafted up at some point. So let me qualm all the issues, because I heard a bunch of low socioeconomic and the whole 9 yards. Closed mouths don't get fed. So I represent Falk. Mr. Broussard represents Boucher. We've heard those two mentionings. I represent Northside. It's our job, if we can possibly figure this out, it's our job to see about helping those particular schools raise that money. If we can equitably do it and distribute it properly, I've got absolutely no problem. I still owe myself 15 to 20 grand from the previous 2 school board races that I have to report every single time. And I've got trouble raising it myself, but I don't think I would have trouble raising and asking every single business owner and every single company and every single attorney and every single person in my district and outside of my district to help me raise 35 grand so we could get that matched, because it's an amazing program. So I understand what everybody's arguing about, but ask the people in those particular districts first before y'all actually have those discussions, because I truly think that if somebody says, Tim, we can get 35 grand on the north side, but you got to help raise 35 grand, I think we can manage it. I'm telling y'all ahead of time, I'm going to start with each board member. Yeah, everybody shaking their head. No. Yeah, okay. Money's coming out of my pocket. I'm asking everything. Hey, your next check, come talk to me. I'm just being honest with you ahead of time. So everybody, let's stop arguing, but we've got to figure out exactly how to go about it, policy, procedure-wise, because as it just reads, that's just a description, and that says nothing about. It says 35 grand for every school, and we don't have that right now. My last question and second question was, is that recurring money? So 10 schools get 35 grand, that's $350,000?
It's not recurring.
It's not recurring, okay.
By my calculations, that would be 14 schools receiving a full $35,000. If every school raised $35,000 and the board was inclined to match it, it would need a
2.8?
budget of $1.5 million.
Oh, for us, but okay, I understand. I'm doubling it. Okay, so let's figure that out first, everybody, because if it's not recurring and we can't find another 500 grand, or we can, I trust you. I got a feeling you have a way of finding it. Then at that point, yeah. But if not, 10 schools that get it, that's 350. That's 150,000 left for everybody else. So let's just figure it out, guys. But let's stop arguing because there's not even a policy up here, so we can table this right now. Excuse me.
Excuse me, Ms. Pat.
Postpone.
I'm sorry, Ms. Pat, did you have a comment? I don't want you to keep standing.
This is okay. I'm Pat Sonia, and I just want to comment on this particular thing. First of all, I don't think the policy's clear, and I really don't want to see you asking a school to raise money to build covered walks and you're going to match it. I think it's the board's job to make sure that the schools are adequately taken care of. I think anything that you do for the children needs to be academic to challenge them, whether it's one of the more affluent schools or one that's not quite as affluent. It needs to go into challenging the minds of the students. And I think, someone talked about dividing it evenly. Divide it evenly and ask that school to work at matching the 11,000. That would give them 22,000. It's a start, but it encourages them to get the parents involved, because I know parental involvement is, that's the heart of the school. If your parents are involved and they work with the children, they will do better in school. And some parents have to work in order to make the money to feed their children. I mean, it's just not, it's not there. They didn't get an education. It wasn't important to them at the time. I can tell you that when the oil business went down in the 80s, that's the best thing that ever happened to Lafayette Parish, the school system, because the parents lost their big paying jobs with the oil companies and they started making sure their children studied. And you didn't realize it, but those of us here did. And so you need to think about, and the policy needs to be well defined, what you can apply for, what kind of projects that you will, endorse, this kind of thing, and try to get it more evenly distributed, and try to use some of the money, school board money, to fix the schools. Spend the money on the children and have the parents involved in doing things to make their children better students. And sometimes they just don't know what to do. We need to guide them in that. But, it's so hard when you see, because it may not be recurring money. And, we don't know what's going to happen. If a hurricane hits here, we're all going to be leaving town.
Thank you.
So the money won't be in Lafayette anymore. So be careful about it and detail the policy before you vote on it, so you know what you're voting on and that the people out there know what they can apply for, what they can work on.
Thank you, Ms.
Pat.
Pat.
No, thank you.
I don't always agree with you, but I agree with you on that. Mr. Angel.
I think you ought to invoke the two talk rule and this, and I think I'm on my second and last one.
Let's wrap it up.
I'm on my or three, whatever Robert says. I think it's 2 or 3. Okay. I want to point out that if 12 or 13 schools, whatever, would raise the money and get matching funds, and we're talking about $500,000, that would be distributed to 12 or 13 schools out of 40 or 50, 45, 47, whatever. That's $500,000 of taxpayers' money that you've snuffed out to give to the other schools. And I don't see any way, shape, or form that's equitable. It's just not equitable, and it's divisive. I don't think it's the right thing to do. I'm totally in favor of everybody raising money. We have kids on the block in Carencro at Four Corners washing cars almost every Saturday on a pretty day. They raise money, but they don't raise money and then turn around and want tax money to match the money they raise. All of the money thus far that anybody ever raised was spent in the schools or whatever program it was in the manner in which they wished. That's equitable way to do it. But to give some to some of us and not to others is just not the right way to do it.
Mr. Broussard.
I think when we came up with that about a month or so ago, we asked administration to come up with a percentage. I think the cap is 35,000, but I don't know if we have agreed on policy as to how we're going to distribute the money. To give 11 schools $35,000 and have nothing for the rest of them, and I agree with Ms. Sonia. We should not be asking anyone to raise money for a covered walkway. That's our job, to protect the health and well-being of our students and everyone else involved in our education. But we need a clear policy as to how we're going to distribute the money. We may be able to raise $35,000 at Alice Boucher. It's a wish and a prayer. It might take us some time to do that. But for this policy to be presented the way it is, and I think that's the first time we see it after we discuss the money we pull from whatever line item to make this happen. But I would encourage the schools to raise the money for their cosmetic use, or not for to send a team to state or to build walkways or anything that need to be done by the school board monies to do so. So with that being said, I would agree with a clear policy or procedure than what we have got. And I don't think the $35,000 was ever said when we first came up with that. That's why I asked for a percentage, and the percentage was a matching fund dollar for dollar. But $35,000 never popped into nobody's head until tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Broussard. Ms. Ella, we haven't heard from you in a very long time.
Okay, when I first heard the board speak about this, wanting to pull money out of the facilities fund to give to parents to use it, to help them raise money, and they were going to match funds and stuff. The first thing I thought was, is this lanyard money? I don't want this money to be treated like lanyard. Mr. Broussard just said something about kids shouldn't have to raise money to build walkways at school. It's the school's job to do that, but you're taking $500,000 away from the facility department. Why not leave it in the facility department? And y'all already have things in place, plans to fix things at our schools. And I understand the concept of wanting parents to get involved. Believe me, I volunteered for over 17 years. I would have loved to see parents get involved and stuff. So I understand that, and it makes common sense, and that you could help, you can double the money that they raise and stuff. But if you're going to do that, do it for structure, things in the school that support the school, things that, the buildings and stuff, the walkways and stuff, not for building walls and beautifying it, I don't know. I'm a little frustrated and passionate as you are about it. I really believe you should split the money between all schools, because not every school is going to raise that money. The policy is not clear. $35,000, I read it, and I'm like, okay, not all schools going to benefit from this. And where's your plan as to what they have a guideline? If you're going to go forward with this, have a clear guideline that the schools and parents can follow.
Thank you, Ms. Ella. Mr. Knezik.
So my suggestion, I think it's a compromise, but would be that maybe we define the motion that we establish a board member discretionary, how can I word this, so that each board member is allocated $55,000 to be a part of this funds matching program that's really more of a board member discretionary. So, for example, if I know that I have up to $55,000 within the schools in my district, I can choose as a board member to challenge them how I see fit in my district, and you can do it differently in your district. And then once I say, hey, this is how I'd like to spend my allocation, and again, it doesn't have to be the $55,000, I can come to the board and say, hey guys, this is how I want to spend my $55,000 for my district. Now, it doesn't have to be $55,000. We can do it per capita per district to make it even more equitable. As far as how the money is distributed amongst us as a board, and then leave it to the board members' discretion on what type of programs they want to run within their district. So that I just put that out there for thought.
So I think that's something we'd have to get some legal counsel on, because I'm not sure what the legalities would be as to allocating part of a budget for board members to make a determination on. But we all feel very passionate about this, and there's probably 1,000 different ways that you could come up with an equitable plan. But I do think you're right, this is not a policy. If this is going to go forward in any form, which I'm not for, but if it does, then we need to be very precise and very clear. Need to know, I really don't think the high school should be treated the same as the elementary schools. I mean, clearly they've got different support with the athletics than the elementary schools do. So a one-size-fits-all just doesn't work. So, I mean, my recommendation, well, let's vote on the current policy or the current guideline or whatever this is, and then send it back to the drawing board for further consideration. Right. Mr. Lashley, I'm going to say this is the last comment unless, Dr. Chasson, Mr. Lashley, and then we're going to vote.
Yeah, I just wanted to, whatever the question was, I wanted to get legal's opinion on it if he had one.
That if this passes, I think it would give guidance to the administration as to, you know, what the majority of the board believes should be done, and then it would take some additional drafting and guidance to shore up the manner in which it would be done. So I'm not prepared to give you advice as to the equities and how to do that, but I think a vote would give direction to your administration as to the desire or opinion of the majority of the board and what step it needs to take to put a formal policy in place to come back to you.
And if this does pass, if you could give some credence and thought process to what Mr. Konezik suggested as far as a district matching program, as far as District 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through 9. I don't know if that's what he was stating. That's what I think my brain heard. And
well, the current motion on the floor is to approve this program or guideline. That's what we're voting on.
Right. When the policy is drafted up, it will come back to the board for us to decide on. Correct? Okay. That's good enough for me.
Okay. All right. Mr. Lashley, last one.
I don't want to discard Mr. Konezik's idea, but if you're going to do that, remember some districts have 3 schools, some like mine have 7, so it would have to be.
I think, yeah, and I think it should be by population. Yeah. I mean, I think I used 5,500. I just divided the number by 9, but I do think it should be by population of students in the district.
And let's please stop referring that this is going to go straight to athletics. I mean, I don't eliminate athletics. You know, I mean, I don't know what you think. You know, we have in my district. Yeah, we got a state championship football team, but this money's not going to the state championship football team.
Shameless plug.
It's going to covered walkways.
Right,
and the reason we're raising the money to do it is this system hasn't built the covered walkways in 30 years. We can win state championships with the facilities we have. Thank you.
Right. This document says organized booster, and my understanding is that boosters are for athletics. Maybe not 100%, but booster clubs are to support athletics, and that's what this guideline says at the very top. So, all right, I'm going to call for the vote.
We could win a state championship in Walmart parking lot.
What's up?
Charge too. Charge for that football game. At that football game at Walmart, and we can charge. Wait, Walmart.
Ms. Morris. Ms. Morris, after this vote, would you allow Mr. Guidry just to make a comment about an agenda item that passed earlier tonight?
I suppose so.
Thank you.
6 for, 3 against.
Ms. Morris.
Mr. Guidry. Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that the action taken by the board earlier for policy file DCF fund balance is an issue that's separate from the transfers that were discussed of that excess, that surplus. I wanted to mention that the revised budgets that were approved by the board this evening were prepared as though those transfers were in fact approved. So by approving the revised budgets that were included in the agenda, the board did in fact approve those transfers being made out of general fund into the capital fund. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was clear on that.